Hi, Sasha.
Hey, Jess.
Hey, hi, everyone. Sarah, Kaelyn.
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Kaelyn.
I got the dreaded note from my internet server this morning that expect delays on internet, but it turns out it's for tomorrow. So about had a little heart attack.
Oh no, my internet cut out yesterday, full stop, and has not come back on. So I this morning ran down to a WeWork, and I'm now in this. I'm I don't know if sorry for the acoustic. I don't know. This is what I'm doing to survive today. So.
We can hear you well. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes. So when we get started, I'm going to just start off with what, about signature gathering and why it's so important. And then I'm going to turn it over to each of you to just introduce yourselves. And then I have some questions. And if you have questions that I should be asking, please feel free to bring it in, just Slack me. Great. Okay, well, we'll get started. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to have a really practical nuts and bolts day about ballot measures for our community today. And we wanted to, one of the main things on ballot measures is qualification. If you don't qualify, none of that other work that you were doing really matters. And states have gotten trickier on how ballot measures are qualified, how signature gatherers are brought into court, not brought into court, what is a valid signature, what's not. And so we wanted to have practitioners, folks that are used to being out there in the field, doing this really hard and important work every day, in terms to figure out what's happening right now with signature collection, what can we do if we're hiring teams to collect, and what are the things we can and should be looking for with our folks that are collecting. So we have a great panel today of folks that have been doing this work for a long time. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. And if you want to just talk a little, hi, Mac, we just got started, so you're pretty okay. Signatures are important is the takeaway. So I'm going to turn it over to Sasha because you're first in my sight line. If you just want to popcorn it to the next person, and then we'll ask some questions.
Sounds good. Great. Well, my name is Sasha Rosen. I use she, hers pronouns. I live in Los Angeles and I run the outreach team. We are a field firm and we do all kinds of field campaigns for progressives. We run campaigns. We do signature gathering to qualify initiatives for the ballot. We do voter registration. We also do voter contact and organizing. I think we're maybe one of the younger firms. We've been around not as long as Lou and Mac doing this, but have done a bunch of stuff, and we've done a bunch of signature gathering. We started doing signature gathering in 2020. We qualified our first initiatives in 2020, and we've qualified 6 initiatives for the ballot in 5 states, and we're collecting signatures right now in LA on a countywide measure where we have to collect 450,000 signatures for the ballot, which is pretty fun. We are doing Nevada abortion, which I'm really excited about and looking forward to qualifying that. And then we just wrapped up Oregon campaign finance reform. And so, yeah, I'll kick it to Mac.
Thanks, Sasha. Hi, everybody. I'm Mac D'Alessandro. I'm the principal at Campaign Industries. We are a national firm based in Boston. My pronouns are he, him, his. Like the outreach team and I'm sure Lou over at Fieldworks, we do signature collection for ballot initiatives, voter registration, the range of voter contact from candidate and issue ID to persuasion to get out the vote. We have been in existence since 2011. We've worked in 46 states at this point. And prior to founding this company, I spent almost 15 years at the Service Employees International Union in their political shop. We have the distinction in our signature gathering work of having set a record of a combined paid and volunteer apparatus. We were running a ballot initiative campaign here in Massachusetts and set a record for the number of signatures not only collected, but a validity rate of over 90% on those collected. I am now going to turn it over to Lou, who's got who's got a cooler hat than I do.
Well, you have a very cool background. So I'm Lou Granofsky. I'm one of the partners at Fieldworks. He, him pronouns. We're sort of doing all the firms first, so that's fine. Similar, field firm here. We do lots of signature gathering, voter registration, canvassing, all the field services. We've been doing signature gathering for about 20 some odd years. We've probably qualified a little over 75 ballot initiatives in our time, about 35 in the last 3 cycles. I think we started doing this about 20 some odd years ago around the signature gathering, because at the time there weren't a lot of progressive field firms doing signature gathering. There's a lot of independent contractors doing things really not in a good way in terms of how they treated staff or in terms of how they were working with campaigns in particular. And so really the signature gathering efforts were seen as sort of separate. And so myself and some folks at the time at the Ballot Measures Strategy Center sort of wanted to change the game and shift how we do things, both in terms of working with campaigns and how workers are treated and paid, and also put a lot of emphasis on quality control. I think as evidence here, I think a lot of things have shifted in the community, and now there's lots of good firms doing good work and paying people well, which is really just wonderful. And I think a commitment to funders and the community to do it the right way. So that's me. I will pass it over to Sarah.
Hi guys, my name is Sarah Parker. I am the Executive Director of Women's Voices of Southwest Florida. I'm not a firm, I'm an organizer. I sit on Vote Yes on 4. It's Executive Committee. We're the smallest grassroots activist group that sits on the Executive Committee. And my pronouns are she, her. And I'm gonna pass it over to Kaelyn.
Who can't figure out how to unmute. Hi, I'm Kaelyn. I'm the Civic Engagement Data Director for Move and Move Action. So Missouri progressive groups have been doing ballot initiatives for a long time. This is my first cycle doing ballot initiatives, but I really focus on the validation side, the managing volunteer side, making sure that folks have all the tools that they need so they can see where volunteers are, who previous collectors have been to get these programs up and running off the ground. And super excited to join you all today.
Well, thank you all for joining us. And I'm really excited that we have a combo of firms and we have folks on the ground that are organizing signature gatherers and folks on the ground that are also doing the quality control, because we all know we need all parts of that to be successful. So I'll start off with the first question. What is the most important thing in your view for campaigns to keep in mind when they start collecting signatures? And I will, if anyone wants to go first, if not, I'll start calling on folks.
I'm happy to go, Jess. So most important thing, and just kind of coming off the last introduction there, is having the quality control and validation system set up, I think. And so you got to know where, and particularly as campaigns have become more, as the requirements have gotten a little trickier in some places, as the opposition's gotten better on attacks in court, and as we, see, more states passing more laws that make things more difficult to get on the ballot. I think knowing where you're at, double checking, making sure you have valid signatures, knowing where people are making mistakes and getting that feedback directly back to the field quickly. To me, that is one of the most important, critical things. And it's only going to continue to be more important as our opposition is going to, has more friendlier judges and are going to try to attack us in court.
Jess, if I could piggyback onto that, I'd say that there's a kind of a concurrent step here. And my first week of my first year of law school, my property professor said, most important thing in any case is walk the land. And by that, he was saying you have to understand the regulatory regime in which you're operating. You can have I totally agree with Lou. QC, solid QC process and validation process is essential, but that even can get tripped up if you don't understand all of the very explicit rules that exist in the jurisdiction in which you're operating. There are places that require that signatures have to be done in view of somebody that provides signs an affidavit as part of the validation process. The rules vary, as Lou mentioned. They're changing and evolving constantly, and to be able to withstand the increased kind of challenges and kind of organized challenges to progressive signature gathering, we've got to really understand those rules up front before we collect our first signature.
I want to piggyback off of Lou and Mac and say that that's correct. I think knowing the laws, definitely like in Florida, right? Knowing the laws is really important. But I also want to say from an organizing standpoint and a volunteer standpoint, it's communicating that to them. Because unlike, firms that understand this and understand that they have to understand the landscape, volunteers might not understand that. They might not understand the laws. They might need to be explained multiple times of why it's important, to make sure someone signs and dates it at the bottom, why it's important. Like that stuff we saw. Why is it important to make sure your county is completely correct? Because then that messes up validation, right? And to kind of prepare the volunteer team, because I saw it, happen in Florida a lot. We had to re-rally our team because they see paid petitioners out there and they become burnt out because they feel like they're in competition. And that's not the case. We're on the same team, right? We're doing the same work. But I also understand the paid petitioners point, like, this is my job, right? And so learning to work, getting them that information and that knowledge, and then teaching them that we have to work symbiotically, because we need both, right? We need both, and keeping them energized as you get that information. I think the first FPF call, Floridians Protecting Freedom call, we had over 1,000 people come and do a volunteer workshop and really explain to them the rules, what to do if someone's being aggressive, what to do if you see a paid petitioner, which I wish we would have spent more time with, because I feel like we would have been able to really to be able to work more symbiotically. Mind you, we did hit the threshold, we did pass it, but I wish at that point in time we would have had those had longer conversations about how to work together.
First of all, congratulations, Sarah. That is huge news in Florida. So congrats on that. And I heard you all had an awesome volunteer program. So I just wanted to celebrate a little bit, because we get to celebrate on these calls.
Thank you so much. Yeah, right. That's awesome. We don't get a lot of celebratory moments in Florida.
That's fair. I asked my attorneys in Colorado all my Arizona-based questions, and they essentially asked me who hurt me before. So when I went over all of my questions on how signatures can get thrown out. So definitely understand that. Sasha or Kaelyn, do you want to, what's your first step?
On my end, it is one, understanding rules and regulations, and then two, making sure that there is a setup that explains what is happening. So I work on dashboards, making sure people can see if they have a goal, what their progress to goal is, how close they are. And then when validation reports start to come back in, it is also my job to make it look pretty. So if you had a bad validation week, it's my job to be but it's not all red, it's pink. Just to make sure that I'm supporting the folks in the field to keep people consistently staying motivated and not being flashing red lights on dashboards. So it's definitely understanding how the field is working to make sure that their reporting is helping and not hurting.
I find pastel colors help calm people down a bit.
They absolutely do. No hard colors over here.
That's the secret sauce. That makes a lot of sense. How do you impart upon the importance of following all the rules, but also encouraging people to still get out there and do it, and that they can do it? And, you know, it's a tricky balance. I think we all walk on this.
Yeah, I was gonna add, I think everybody has said basically what I would say. And the only thing to add to that is it's, quality and knowing all the rules is really important, but we have to do that at scale, right? At a massive scale. And like Florida, that's a great example where you have to collect, 1 million signatures. And so you have to have it. And so to be able to do all of that kind of precision really requires excellent management, and really like good experienced managers who have been through a couple like reps of doing something hard at scale. And then, so you need management at kind of all levels and like good ratios of managers, so that you can spot problems quickly. And then the other thing is just really, really good training programs and systems that allow those managers to work with staff, and volunteers, like whomever, whichever way you're doing it, to be able to really, again, catch problems, set people up from the front end. I think those things are, it's one thing to know all of the problems, like know all of the rules, but if you're not able to disseminate those to thousands and thousands of people at scale, then you're really only going to be able to collect a small number of petitions.
Yes, so we all have to collect. It's the number of petitions and that magnitude. And, Sarah, how many did you have to turn in Florida? It was over 1 million, right? I think that's what.
We turned in over 1 million, but I think it was 891,643. I think that's the exact number. I don't quote me on that, but I messed it up on radio once, so that's why
we will not quote you on it. You got it done. You got it done. You understand.
891,000. Yes.
That's massive. I live in Montana, and that's more people. I think we have a little over 1 million people in states. So
and we also had to do it like by a congressional district as well. So it was pretty hard, but we did an amazing job.
You all did. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you for the next question that I'm going to ask. I'll start off with you. What have been the biggest challenges campaigns have faced in signature collection over the recent years? And how did you overcome these challenges this cycle?
I think I talked about that a little bit, but I can kind of explore it more. I think that we had a couple of times in our during the BI that our volunteers got really burnt out. And I think that that's something that people really need to consider, because our volunteers collected over 200,000 petitions. And also they're the same ones that are going to be voting, right? They're the same ones that are going home and bringing this to their table and their family. If they're burnt out by the issue, that makes it harder to get people at the polling, like at the voting booths later. That and fundraising, it was really hard with Florida. Like, I know that a lot of times Florida gets on the call and we're like, we need money, but that's what happened. We were struggling. We had to fundraise consistently, and it got pretty scary at points in times. It was amazing. And even now, the national tide is turning and people are like, okay, maybe Florida does have some fight left, which we do. We have tons of fight left. There's tons of activists on the ground, but I think funding was a big thing. And then having the communication about paid petitioners and volunteer petitioners. As far as like good things, we had things called hubs set up. So there were like different people were allowed to come to the table and be a part of this, even if they were like, we're a nonpartisan campaign. So even Democratic offices could create a hub where they had printed out all of their petitions, and then people can go there and pick them up and also drop them off. And then it would be sent down to where I am in Sarasota. And then there would be for the volunteers, and then there would be quality checks, right? And people would like send in, and then sometimes they would email it and they'd be like, please make sure you check my petitions right. Call me back later. And having volunteers to get on the phone with them and being like, hey, we're doing great. That kind of energizes them. They're like, I'm going to get more petitions, right, from my friends and my family. The campaign just called me. And I think being personable, like outside of the business and funding, being personable and letting them know that, letting volunteers know, like, we hear you. like the paid petitioners can be a little aggressive, and that's real, but they're doing their job and we need them to do their job. So like, coming to think outside of the box, like, so like we started going to concerts and there would be sometimes paid petitioners, volunteer petitioners, and that was good. I mean, there was even times that I was out there because I'm boots on the ground, but they didn't know that I was on the executive committee. And I'd be like, actually, you're not supposed to say that, and like catch them up really quick. And you're like, you need to look at this, like double check your work. Which was very very interesting. It was very interesting because I don't think half of them believed me. They're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, outside of a Paramore concert, right? I think it was really creative and going to where people were as far as organizing and volunteers. And then the quality control, like I think we were in our 70%. Like, I think at the beginning, even though we had those calls, there was still issues with a little bit of the quality control that we needed to like counties. And it came down to our volunteer team doing a system of like calling all of the supervisor of elections and being like, why would you throw this out? And like having a spreadsheet and like checking off, like if you have different color pins in this county, or if you have this, like there were, we've even had an issue where they were just throwing some out and it was pretty problematic. And, we worked through that. It was obviously disingenuous why they were throwing those petitions out, but having those conversations, building this relationship with the supervisor of elections outside of the paid petitioning it's really, really important. And we really needed to like, make sure that we did our quality control and make sure that our volunteers really understood. I think that answered it, right?
Absolutely. I want to bring you to Colorado to talk to some of our volunteers, Sarah.
Anytime. You guys hit me up. I'm always down to help. I'm really big in this for the fight.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. And it's really helpful to hear your experience recently of going through this process. So thank you so much.
I want to piggyback on Sarah. I think a challenge we had was we did not collect signatures for an issue for the 22 cycle. So this was our first post redistricting cycle collecting signatures. And so a challenge that we had early on was like, oh, these maps are very different than the maps that we had. So like our legislative maps in Missouri are much more favorable to breaking a supermajority, but the trade-off for that was that the congressional map is crap. And so like the city of Columbia, for example, where the University of Missouri is now split in half in between two different congressional districts. And so you've got to make decisions. You have to qualify 6 of the 8 congressional districts. So one thing we really struggled with early on was like, what 6 districts do we target? Like, what combination do we do? We found a good combination. We have another ballot initiative running, and they're both doing 2 different combos of congressional districts. One made a different decision to pull both sides of Mizzou in, thinking that they could qualify with the whole city of Columbia versus only doing half of it, like our first ballot initiative did. So congressional redistricting is a thing that we will have to think about then in 2030. Like if the IB process stays the way that it is, we want to continue to do work. Just thinking forward, this unearthed for us, we also have to fight for a decent congressional map because it impacts how we can collect signatures.
Oh, that's such a good point. How they intersect now, like the different pieces of how many different things can mess up ballot measures or can affect ballot measures. You might not think of redistricting as part of that, but it absolutely has a role there. That's really interesting. And I think that's also, Kaelyn, to your point, I think it's one of the things that I've seen is that people are like, oh, I collected 2 years ago or 4 years ago. I don't need to go through the training. Sarah, I'm sure you get that. I'm sure everyone on this call gets that. But the rules change, the boundaries change, and it's up to us to train those folks. So,
Jess, I was going to.
Oh yeah, Mac, go ahead.
I was just going to add. The other thing that's changed a lot, I've noticed in kind of voter engagement more broadly, but especially in the context of signature gathering, is the atmosphere. And I think one of the challenges that we've faced in a lot of these contexts, and especially in the signature gathering context, look, there's always been opposition to the work we do, but now it's more organized, it's more aggressive. It's because they know, like we do, that if we don't get enough signatures, we don't make the ballot. And so they're going to throw their legal challenges and their challenges in the legislature, whatever, but they're also going to throw those challenges into the field. And an essential part of the training that we all must do is prepare our canvassers for that kind of. It's like the other side has kind of adopted the Saul Alinsky model here. aggressive organizing and confrontational organizing. And I've noticed a lot of campaigns that I've worked with haven't always been prepared for that. So we make it a part of the work we do on every campaign.
Yeah, I was going to add, I think opposition is one part of problems for us, but then there's also what we do to hamstring ourselves. I feel like, kind of every campaign I've worked on is always like the two biggest problems for us always are time and money. And people, and I get that this is a real tension for people who are, because like the sooner you can start, actually the more money you can save most of the time. But you don't have that money. So you have to start later. Anyway, I think this is just a problem for us as progressives to really try and figure out how do we get started sooner with, some money and figure out how to kind of use that money to raise more money. I think we're all trying to figure that out more, but those are every single time, no matter what, when it comes down to it, the biggest problems for us are time and money. So everything else is just kind of like, if we had more money and we had more time, we'd be great.
I think that could be a tattoo for all of us that are working on campaigns. It's not a strategy issue. It's a resource issue right now. And, I think as someone that runs these campaigns, I can make smarter decisions when I have money up front. I have to make different decisions if I am trying to get the money in the whole time, which, it is what it is. Lou, I'll turn it over to you. And I know you've had some experience with the laws changing on signature gathering and all of that too. And
on this question, Jess, you mean on challenges?
New challenges that you're seeing.
I don't want to reiterate what everyone's already said, and I agree those are massive challenges, and Sasha is right that the cash flow is a real major challenge, and when we start, always when we start. And so, but from the paid signature gathering perspective, I'd say the things that are the biggest challenges happened around after COVID, just major shifts in the labor market, in expectation, in wages, in how both organizers and directors are working is just different. And it's all in a good way. It's all moving in the right direction in terms of like people getting paid more money and having more time and doing all the right things. But it does make the cost of qualification more expensive, and as does just inflation. And so along the lines is we're sort of always competing for early money, but also paid signature gathering has becoming more expensive, which I think just sort of puts us back to an emphasis on when we can put resources into volunteer signature gathering and into organizing, we should be doing that. And because, they're never free and it's hard. And there was a point at which which is a better investment, paid or volunteer, because paid was never free. It's still really hard work and costs money. But, I think continuing to push that has been a big one. And then I just come back to my first statement, which is the biggest shift has been these sort of conservative judges in states that we are fighting, and the courts are not on our side, and we need to be prepared. And there have been some serious legal challenges happening, and I expect that we'll see more of them.
Which puts a premium on making sure that the signatures we collect are good and can withstand.
Yeah. And buffer, right? Like that we have enough. But I mean, just to give, again, I don't know that any other state will be like this, but the Arizona Supreme Court, in a fight we were in, ruled that the Secretary of State's invalid signatures are invalid twice. Like they can count them against the campaigns twice. It is just crazy what some of these judges are doing in the conservative states. But, so I think that's the other challenge.
And I just want to flag this because I don't think a lot of our clients don't necessarily see this, and why would they? But the cost pressures associated with today's labor market aren't just like we got to pay people more per hour. That tension about starting earlier. If you start very early, you're triggering ACA compliance issues. There's a whole host of things that come with employing people for a longer period of time that also add to the cost beyond simply what we pay people per hour.
Those are really interesting points that, the double counting bad signatures essentially in Arizona increases the number, and that also increases how long we have to keep people circulating for, because we just need really high numbers in a lot of these states. And a lot of the judges, we can see what they've done on this.
And they're attacking. I mean, Kaelyn probably knows this better than anyone right now about what's happening in Missouri. Like, they're just the conservative legislatures are attacking the process, and they will continue to do that in the states that matter the most to us, because those are the states we're proactively going in, because that's our only recourse, because we can't get anything through the legislature, and that's where they're going to hurt us. So anyway, nothing new for anyone, engaged in these campaigns that we're dealing with, but it's getting aggressive from the other side, because we have gotten better at qualifying and winning. And so that's where the threat is for them.
And I guess the next part of this question, I want to dig into this a little bit more, but what have you done in your states to overcome this trickiness of either signatures over being double counted or being, the distributed requirement? Anyone want to just throw out some of the things that you're doing to solve for some of these harms? Oh, I just sounded like a high school debater. That was unfortunate.
I'll say we have intense just quality control procedures, and then great relationships with some of the larger county election boards. We are not like getting things through that shouldn't be through, but in the way that Sarah said, like, in this county, what would get thrown out, and making sure that we train volunteers to that. We don't really have a lot of those problems. It usually comes from the Secretary of State, the voter file being wrong, and all that jazz. But we have great relationships on the ground to try to mitigate some of that harm. And then just great, in addition to signatures happening, lobbying programs happening in the legislature while we fight, like the double-edged sword of the legislature trying to change the process while we are in the middle of the process. And so what we're fighting now is they are trying to change the way it passes. I think there are probably some collecting rules in that legislation as well, but changing the way that you have to get to actual passage, which is the next panel, I think. So going from a simple majority to a majority in 6 of the 8 congressional districts, or a majority in a majority of state house districts, are things that we're fighting against in the next phase, not so much this phase.
Yeah, I think that in addition to everything we've already talked about in terms of understanding the rules of the road and making sure you've got a really stringent quality control program, I think it's we've just increased the buffer, and really focus on collecting even more than we used to give ourselves more room to not just. I mean, we have confidence in our quality control processes, but again, that additional cushion helps you to weather some of those potential challenges down the road.
I think I want to piggyback off of everyone again and say that everyone's correct. One of the things, though, that we did in Florida is that we consistently held workshops I believe it was like almost once a week for new volunteers. So there was a way to get them through a training and a process, and so they understood the quality control, because you might get people that, like, we did our first workshop and it was 1,000 people. And then even towards the end of our petition collecting, we still had maybe 10, 15, 20 people showing up. And that was impactful because those 10, 15, 20 people could have collected, over 100 signatures. And if they didn't have that quality control, if we would have cut off that program, it could have harmed us, I think, in the end, at least with our volunteer signatures.
That's really smart. Anyone else on that question? Okay. So how should campaigns think about setting up their management of their signature program? How do paid and volunteer signature programs work hand in hand? I think most of these, especially in these larger ballot measures, you need to have a paid program along with a volunteer program to make this work. So I'd love to just think about how we would start with the management of a signature program, and then how paid and volunteer works together.
I can kick this off. And so I think in an ideal world, this is a really symbiotic relationship between the paid and the volunteer program. And, I think I'm going to guess that Lou and Mac will probably agree. Like, there's a set of firms out there who are really committed to bolstering the volunteer program and making sure that it goes well. There's also paid firms who are not that interested in the volunteer program. And I think that that's one consideration that the campaigns should really make in their selection of firm, is who is going to actually, try and make sure that this process goes well. Because Sarah, your point, like there can definitely be this tension between the two, right? Of competing for turf or competing, and it really shouldn't be that way at all. And I think for firms that are really committed to the campaign, like just winning the campaign, qualifying, like that are committed to the mission, what you want is a firm that's going to say, the way that we think about it all the time is, we want the volunteers to experience success, to come back over and over, to feel like they're welcomed by us, and to be well trained by us, because that's going to be overall better for everybody, right? They're going to come back, they're going to do more, we're going to collect more signatures, it's going to lower the costs, and it's more likely that the campaign's going to actually win, that we're going to vote. Like, that's how you leave it in a better position. And so I think, in terms of I think the campaign really, that requires intentionality from the campaign to first hire a firm that is committed to working with volunteers, and then also to help triage some of these, the places where there's conflict, right? So the conflicts are around turf, and who gets to go where, and what we do is we actually just help manage turf for volunteers, because we just think that that's going to be easier and better. But not every firm is willing to do that. And we also help train, there's a whole bunch of things that we do to set up. And I think lots of firms do that, but not every firm. So I think those are some of the things that I think about when launching a campaign.
I think most of the progressive firms, like the three folks at this panel, and there's maybe a couple others, are sort of going to do this the right way. I think, though, the other firms, there's independent contractor firms, and, generally not do this the right way or care about it and actually see it as a hindrance. I think having sort of really been a big part of what we were trying to build from the beginning, mostly because we know that, like Sasha said, a hybrid campaign of paid and volunteer that's working well together is more likely to win. Not just qualify, but win, because it bolsters the volunteer, it builds the program. And honestly, I always think about Signature Drive as like the beginning of, the beginning of your campaign. Like it used to be like, oh, it's qualification and now your campaign begins. I'm like, no, it's as soon as your drive starts, because you have the opportunity to message to, 10, some cases, 10, 15% of the population of the state, what the campaign message is. But, some things that just, we've done working on a campaign now. Jess and I have done a lot. We've done a lot with other campaigns where we really are incorporating volunteer stuff. The guiding principles for me, are always give the volunteers priority everywhere. They're always first. They want a site, they're there. If there happens to be, sometimes we can manage the turf and, but there's still going to be some volunteer that's at the library when we get there that wasn't there. And we just move the paid people along because we want the volunteer to have the best experience. So that's like one of the first principles we operate with. Is volunteers are always the priority. But the second thing I also think is like, it's just sometimes it's a campaign tendency to separate out the volunteer program and really, and I think that's the wrong way to go. I think folding it in and bringing it together. And I always say, don't be scared about losing a few volunteers to the paid program. Like, who cares? It's okay. In fact, it's probably better. Yes, maybe they can go do a few hours a week free on their volunteer time. But if they're going to work for the paid firm, they're going to be out there 4 days a week. One of the best messengers, one of the best petitioners. And it's a good experience for them if they really care about it, that the campaign is investing in community members that care about the issue and are tied to it. It's a great use of campaign resources and funds, I think, to pay folks who really are connected to the campaign. Don't try to keep them for their free signatures. And then from there, it's all about what's your distribution and intake systems and having good systems, like, sort of for the petition. I think those are the three things I tend to focus on the volunteer pieces. But I think some of the top level guiding principles Sasha talking about are critical.
And I just want to underscore like what Lou said, that there are some firms who really do not see it this way, where in LA, one of the reasons we actually were hired was because one of the other firms we are competing against, not anybody on this call, explicitly said, we will not, if you do a volunteer program, we won't manage their signatures. We don't care. We're like that. They saw that as like, they were like, this is competition for us. And we don't, we're not going to, it's just a waste of our time was basically the way that they said it. So, and so, the campaign was like, well, we do have a lot of volunteer programs that we want to engage in this campaign. And so that means we're not going to hire you. So. Anyway.
Yeah. And Jess, I would say just like at the outset, big red flag, having been both a client and a vendor is when, if somebody says to you that they're not willing to work collaboratively with others, or whether they're volunteers or other firms, like in a lot of these big statewide initiatives, multiple vendors are going to be involved. And, I've had the pleasure of working with both Lou and Sasha, and there's enough, if you're good at this and committed to doing this the right way, you shouldn't have any problem working with others who also are similarly committed. Be wary of those who express reservations about doing so.
That's some good advice. Sarah or Kaelyn, I know your roles are you're not necessarily with the paid firm, but you've managed and worked with paid and volunteer programs. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I think that I want to uplift, our firm was pretty great. I think it's mostly our volunteers' attitudes too. Let's be very real and clear. They're activists that are on the ground, like me. I am one of those people that will go into a Democratic office and yell at someone, okay? We're notorious for, being kind of flip over the table. So we have activists that are on the ground that are very, very passionate, and they feel, and I was even like that. When I first got on the executive committee, I was like, why aren't we just not paying the organizers and the activists? Signature collection. We don't need that. In my head, right? I was very new to this. And I learned very quickly that we 100% needed that, right? We 100% needed a paid signature collecting firm. So I think that, I started talking to my own team and being like, I understand. But it goes back to what I said earlier. It's really having that conversation that this is a necessity. This is a necessity, and that they should also check their attitudes too. Volunteers are not yes, they should be uplifted, but also it's a leveling that this usually these ballot initiatives means more than how I feel as an activist and how you guys might feel as a paid firm. I think also I heard that one of the other states did it, and I'm kind of disappointed we didn't, is regranting, as if, having funds and a paid firm, but also regranting to volunteers. So they kind of feel like they're being paid too, right? And it kind of does change the dynamic. And that's, that would come from the actual campaign. But I think that that's super, super important in that way.
Thanks, Sarah. Kaelyn?
I think the way that we combine both programs is that our congressional districts are so giant that we sent the paid firm to places where we didn't have base. So like there weren't a lot of turf wars, because like Congressional District 7 has one bigger city, big-ish city, and then one smaller city than that big-ish city. Great examples. So we sent the paid firm to the smaller of the two where we didn't have base. Let the volunteer cover the volunteer, and then our orgs, because our orgs also ran paid program. So they had paid crews of people. So we let our volunteers and organizations programs run where they had base. Let the paid firm run where we didn't have base. And that seemed to keep everybody off of each other's toes.
Great. That seems very smart. I want to ask the next question, and I think this might be one of our more, I think we'll get some pretty strong opinions here. When hiring a firm to do your signature collection, what should you look for? What are the questions we should be asking in interviews? What are some of the considerations? And I do want to spend a little time talking about independent contractors versus staff with some of the firms on this question too, because that came up in our last conversation.
Yeah, I think we'll probably all say, I'll start it. So, well, we would never pay by the signature. We think that is, and there's definitely some states that don't allow you to do that. But even in the states that do, I think that that's the wrong move, because that incentivizes fraud, and it incentivizes, it just incentivizes people to do shady things, like say that the signature is for something that it's not. So we don't do that. And then I also, well, yeah, I think that paying your workers fair living wages to go out and do the work is really important. And, so that's why we don't do any 1099. We only do W-2 employment, and pay people an hourly base wage, and incentives for hitting goals. And those are that is what we think allows us to recruit people who are just more passionate about the issues and about doing the work, and are going to be able to, allow them to do this work, plus benefits, like PTO, healthcare. Those are things that I think we all, as progressives, really believe in. And this is an important part of being able to make the work possible for all kinds of people, and not just a specific set of people. The other thing I think actually about the 1099 world is that it just doesn't, it doesn't allow you to train a whole lot of activists, right? There's just not enough people who can go out and do this kind of work. And so it doesn't allow us to build a movement. And I think that being able to recruit and train a bunch of people to go out, even if they don't do it forever, that even if they do it for a couple days and they're like, this isn't the right thing for me, but they have this experience of going out and talking to folks. I think that is valuable for our movement building overall. There's a lot of people who say, I got into politics. My first thing I did was I went and collected signatures, or I went and knocked on doors, and and I quit after 3 days. It was horrible, but I still decided that I wanted to do data in politics. So. Anyway, that's some of my rant, but I'll let other people rant on this. I'm excited about it.
I think for us, picking a firm is, previous success in the state, it's easier to rehire a firm that like knows the quirks of your state, because every state has its quirks, I think. And then also then the familiarity with the type of ballot initiative. So like if you know Missouri and know repro, great, come help us. Sometimes if you just know repro and not Missouri, but it's like this is how we were successful someplace else, it's also great to see those things. So I think we have based it on previous success, and then just like, do you know this type of initiative? How did you message it before? Can you come work in Missouri?
Yeah, I think the in terms of the 1099 W-2 discussion, we also only hire folks on a W-2 basis, and part of it for us is kind of the values that we try and bring to the work, and we think that an employment relationship that is based on somebody joining our staff is a really important first step in creating that bond. And we treat people as such. We give people opportunities for growth and promotion, even on short-term projects. A lot of our project managers now started as canvassers cycles ago. That's something that's made possible and strengthened by the fact that people are employees of ours and not just contractors.
Everything that was just said, I agree with. I think we had started a long time ago, 20 years ago or so. We started because there weren't really any national firms doing hourly, and we thought it was really important. And so I'm just all there on that with everybody that's saying on the no 1099s. I think, values matter for our progressive campaigns in a lot of ways. And so understanding what the values are of the firm and what they work on, what kinds of campaigns they work on, I think matter. Not everybody. Our world has become transactional and, in a lot of ways. And so that's, I think unfortunate, but I think what we have seen is as we, again, sort of movement building, big picture wise, folks are looking at some of their campaigns in a vacuum. But when you build firms that do bad work and sometimes good work, they're building their capacity to make it easier and better for the conservatives to qualify their stuff. And so I tend to sort of just sort of warn folks of that. And sometimes like in the same state, like you've built a firm in a state, now they have state experience, and then all of a sudden they have this operation and they can turn around and qualify something else very quickly in that state. So I think, the values matter. But if you're like in the thinking about the RFP process and like, really, who am I going to hire? And I have these several different firms that I like, I'd say get under the hood on the QC, the quality control, the validation processes. That's where I think firms will, they'll open up the hood and they'll show you the engine. Just ask for it. As a person that pitches all the time and talks to campaigns, I mostly don't get in there because people don't want to know how the engine works or the sausage is made. But if you want to know, just ask, and any one of us on this call, whatever, will show you how the cylinders fire and all that stuff. So those would be my piece there.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Kaelyn, your point about experience matters. And I think when people, and this is like, we butt up against this a lot because we're a relatively new firm, right? So it's like we don't have as much experience qualifying initiatives in particular states. But I do think one question you can ask is to kind of get at this like quality is, what were your validity rates on other signature gathering efforts, right? And that's a way that you can actually get at, what is your ability? Like, it's not just like, how do you do the process, but also like, what did it produce? And that allows you to kind of evaluate a firm from another. And I think those things that really matters. The, Mac, they had like 90% validity rates is amazing. So, just hire Mac to do stuff.
I think it's also important to note, like, if firms are not willing to show you what the engine looks like or show the systems, the dashboards, the QC process, that's telling you something else too.
And make no mistake, there actually 2 quick points. There are firms out there whose model is intentionally a volume business, especially in the context of signature gathering, a volume business based intentionally on churning through employees. They're not interested in retention. They're passing along the cost of having to hire new people constantly. We all have to hire people because there's always drop off and attrition. But some firms really count on like massive levels of attrition because, quite honestly, they don't treat people well. They just are gathering as many raw signatures as they can and hoping they stick. So, looking under the hood in a bunch of different contexts is really important. One of those ways, too, that is increasingly I've found important in the context of signature gathering or anything where you're dealing with like hundreds of thousands or more signatures is what kind of coverage and protections do you have as a vendor that can provide protection to your clients? And I'm not talking about general business liability insurance. Do you have employment practices liability insurance? Do you have in effect workers' comp policy for the person who steps off a curb and gets their foot run over by a bus? That actually happened. So making sure that cyber, as a lot of states have online voter registration now, that makes the process of collection more efficient, but can open you up to a whole new set of threats. Does the vendor have a cyber protection policy that covers not just the vendor, but also potentially the client if something goes awry?
Oh, those are super good points. Now I'm adding to my list on things to ask. So those are very good questions. Sarah, from your experience doing it, running the volunteer program this year in Florida, anything that you would be looking for next time you're running a campaign?
I want to say, I was a big part of the volunteer program. I really want to shout out our campaign manager and the actual organizing director that came on later on. Taylor Aguilera did an amazing job with it, and she was very, very well involved. One of the things that I think I would look for is like things that you guys mentioned. I rarely knew about it. So like having a living wage, in Florida, you can't do it by petition. And I like that. I like the fact of that, but more or less having a living wage. And I also like diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we come to progressive movements, I want to see more people of color in the positions. And I think from here on out in Florida, we're making more solid decisions when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think that that's important as a progressive movement, as a progressive activist, and as a Black woman, right? I would be interested if I work on a campaign again, is seeing the smaller firms come in and building power and building a movement and building up their firm as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So we're at our last question. So I'm going to give it to all of you as a chance to pitch. What does your firm or program do particularly well? And what are you the most proud of what you do in terms of signature gathering?
I'll start. So one of the reasons I said to ask what people's validity rates are is because I think we do a really good job of that. And we have really high quality signatures. We have very high validity rates on all of our ballot initiatives thus far. And then the second thing I think we do also really well is I think we really are really good at working with volunteers and a big sizable volunteer program. And then, I'll just kick it. And then the third thing I think we do is we really also do a great job of prioritizing DEIJ and all of the work that we do and making sure that this is a living, breathing part of all of our campaigns. We set DEIJ goals for every single campaign. We work with our clients to set DEIJ goals. So those are kind of the three things that I'm pretty particularly proud of in the work that we do on signature gathering and all of our field work.
Great. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. It's kind of corny, but our motto has always been that we like to leave a place better than we found it. We always hire Indigenous personnel wherever we do our work. It's not only are they more effective, but it yields a better outcome for clients, we have found. But the fact that we've I've got senior project managers who were formerly incarcerated and started as canvassers and are now directing programs for us. I think that legacy, this work, signature gathering, canvassing, this is can be a segment of the labor market composed of people who don't have a lot of direct contact with full employment. They can be underemployed folks, chronically unemployed folks. We're giving a lot of people their first real chance at not just a job, albeit a temporary, often short-term one, but a chance for advancement. And that is something we're extremely proud of, and that's a responsibility that we hold very, very dearly to. So that's, again, kind of corny, but really important for us.
I don't want to toot my own horn, or
this is the time to toot your own horn, Kaelyn.
Our data practices are probably next to none. The way that we have tracked circulators, notaries, what orgs did previously to help them set goals this year is something that we haven't seen in other places. And so when we started collecting signatures last April, we dusted off our list of circulators and we're able to just go right back to them. And it's like, hey, remember last time we circulated on Medicaid? Want to come join us again? We had a list of notaries of people that it was like, you were a notary 2 years ago. Did you let it expire? Do you still have that? And so we were able to get program up and running faster because we weren't starting from nothing. We were starting from a base of folks that have done this before and just needed to be trained on current rules and current boundaries, but not from the ground up.
Thanks, Kaelyn. Sarah, you want to go next?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think for us, it's the holistic approach. I think is something we've really wanted. Basically the thing I was talking about, where we're starting drives, and that's the kickoff of the campaign, and tying that into sort of winning. And so I think that's a really important piece for me personally, and something we're really good at, and thinking about how to bring all the pieces together and doing a really holistic approach to your qualification drive, not just qualification and in a vacuum. But at the sort of detailed level, I think there's a couple of things. We put a lot of money and resources over the years into developing systems for both tracking in the field, quality controlled, that gives us the ability to sort of like track rates and validity at the site level, and things like that have really sort of opened up the management tools quite a bit. And then also on the QC side, we've just been doing a lot since before OpenAI was OpenAI. We were doing AI work there, but that we can now like process 100,000 signatures in 3 days because of AI and things like that, which really helps on big drives to be able to process signatures quickly and validate them quickly. And so I'm really proud of the work we're doing, but also continue to do, because you have to keep working at it. It's not like, oh, it's done and it's a tool. Like you have to keep programmers on it constantly. And so it's worth the investment.
Thanks, Lou. And Sarah, I want to hear about the volunteer program. How?
So our volunteer program was amazing. I think it was like one of those things where we didn't just talk about bringing everyone to the table. We brought everyone to the table, from LGBTQIA organizations to Black rights to unions, because it impacts everyone, right? Definitely abortion. It really does impact a lot of people. So doing that was really amazing. We had a hub. When I talked about the hubs, the people that would collect the petitions for us in that certain county, we'd have several. In some counties, we had more than one hub. So we'd have 1 to 3 of them. We had an organizing committee that we had calls on that almost anyone was really invited to. We had the big stakeholders, the actual grassroots activists, and having their voices and having their ideas. It was completely impactful. We thought, I believe we put our goal was like 100,000, and I think did 200,000 petitions. As the number went up, we were shocked, which again goes to Florida. It has so much fight left. If anything you take from out of this is that we are fighting like hell, right? And having those calls, having those workshops, bringing people to the table, making them really feel a part of the process was important, because even when we celebrated, it wasn't like we were celebrating as a campaign. You could feel the energy in any progressive space. We were celebrating as like Florida. And having the trainings were really important again. So having those workshops throughout the entire process, even before you start petition collection, having those workshops to tell them, like, make sure it's black and blue ink. If you run into someone and they're telling you to leave a property, what do you do? Having those scenarios and giving them to organizers, really going and doubling down on that, really helped out people. We also had a form where like people could report things that were happening that may have been maybe violent, or like, because again, we live in Florida. We have, y'all know how our laws are here, and y'all see us all over the news. It can get violent in the streets sometimes. It really can. You don't know what people are going to do nowadays, right? It's just the landscape that we live in. So having that comfort there for them, encourage them to go out more, definitely in red places, which people were kind of nervous to begin with. But having that comfort there, having those scenarios, and then having these hubs that were set up, I think it created and then we also broke it down, and we would meet. And then we had 6 different areas, like North Florida, South Florida, Southwest Florida, Central Florida. Then having those broken down into like the big macro organizing committee, right? And then having micro meetings. So talking in in your own landscape, in your own county, or in your own area was really important, because it changes. Orlando isn't like Sarasota. Orlando is very liberal and blue. Why we have Sarasota, Michael Flynn lives like in this, in this area. So having those conversations and having the people and the actors on the ground that knew the landscape was super important. Quality control and building, and how we built our relationships with the SOEs, and how we did our own quality control, and then we sent it to the firm that also did quality control. I think that we did really well. The hubs and having everyone at the table, and not just having them at the table and telling them to be quiet, having them at the table and telling them to speak. Please give us ideas. How do we do this together? Let's work together. It really made people buy in.
I love it. I feel so inspired with all these just learning about all the technology that folks are using around the real organizing that's happening in Missouri and Florida. It's just really encouraging hearing all the ways that we're trying to figure out how to get these ballot measures on qualified, and being aware that ballot measures, we tend to move faster than legislators or elected officials for really important political issues. So I'm just so grateful that you all joined us here today, and I think I'm definitely going to be looking y'all up to figure out how. I want to hear more about Florida and Missouri systems so we can replicate it other places. And to our firms, thank you so much. I think it was really helpful to talk about the difference between employees versus contractors today too, and just what you all are doing to work with both paid staff and volunteers. Also, Mac, I'm a little concerned that you're living in Boston wearing a Cubs hat. I grew up in Dorchester, so I'm very concerned about this one, but we can talk about that later. Everyone,
Sorry.
and we look forward to, oh, you're on mute, yeah.
I was going to say, I was born and raised in Chicago, so I came here for law school. I'm not a real, I still have hard time with some of this municipality names out here.
I grew up right by Milton, so I was on the Dorchester, yeah. But anyway, we used to walk over to Milton to get our Christmas trees. So I looked you up, so I was like, Boston Cubs hat, that's interesting. But it was so great having you all. I just think it's so interesting, and please let us know if you have any other questions. And I think you all are connected to each other via one of the emails.
Thanks for the chat, y'all. Thanks, Jess, for hosting us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.